Okay, I'm recording. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Geo and Joel podcast. It is the day before Election Day, Monday, November 2nd. We will be discussing the election, giving some analysis, um, talking about some of the pros and cons of the two candidates, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and talking about our own opinions and feelings on on the election.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better myself, Gio. I am so honored to be here, and to our lovely audience, you're in for a great listen.
Yeah, we love the audience. The audience is
Yes.
number one.
Yes, all zero of you.
Yeah,
So,
there
Gio.
you go. Yeah, go ahead. And this is going to be a good opportunity for us to get ourselves on the record and establish ourselves as election predictors. Um, and Joel, you sent me a preliminary version of your election prediction
Yeah.
before this recording. So I certainly think it'll be interesting to discuss and deconstruct that, and I'll give my own informal take on what I think is going to happen, and then we'll see, I guess, in 1 day or 2 days, or maybe several weeks or months, who came closer to the actual outcome. So, you want to go ahead and break down what you said, or do you want to just ease into it?
Yeah, I can start the breakdown of it. I mean, um,
By the
the,
way,
yeah.
I'm chewing gum, so do you hear that? Or do you want me to like spit my gum out, or am I good?
No, you're good. You're good. You're good.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
So, I wanted to be a political forecaster because I've seen people the last 6 or 7 months praising 538 for being the most accurate when it came to 2016. So I wanted to take a dive at it, and that way going forward when I predict, and spoiler alert, my prediction is that Donald Trump will be reelected. If I am correct, then people will see me as a political guru.
Yeah, and
So
you'll elevate our podcast out of this current valley into a tremendous peak, and
yes.
we'll become, or at least you'll become, and I guess I'll ride on your coattails. Uh, you'll become some new, I don't know, Nostradamus, and that'll be great. But if not, I mean, I guess no one's going to pay attention, right? You're a nobody. We're
Yeah, no,
nobodies.
what's the worst that can happen? I mean, it's a shot in the dark.
Right,
But
right.
my shot in the dark involves an election that comes down to Donald Trump with 270 electoral votes and Joe Biden with 268. So this would be, if I'm, have we ever had a tie in presidential election history? I don't think so, but this would be the closest we've ever gotten to it.
Yeah, I don't think there was a tie, but it has definitely gone to the House of Representatives at least once. Um, back in the 1800s, there, that was the Henry Clay election. I forget the details, but I don't think we've ever had an exact tie.
Okay. So, yeah, so the closest we've gone long time ago. And I make this prediction with also predicting that Biden will have 6% more of the popular vote. And I attributed that. I was doing some research and I was writing this up. I attribute that to the already record strong early voting in states like California and New York. And I've got some articles here on the numbers. Yesterday, it was reported that over 1 million New York City residents alone had already voted early, and there was an article talking about how California had shattered early voting records. Over 9 million people already casting their ballots, and those are overwhelmingly going to be votes for Joe Biden. So I think Joe Biden can even win the popular vote outright. You know,
I think that's a foregone conclusion, Joel. I mean, I don't think there's any debate about Joe Biden winning the popular vote, right?
yeah, no, there's basically no debate. What it comes down to is the pesky electoral college, and the way I see it and the way I described it when I wrote this down is that on election night, um, all of the projections based on the election day voting and the numbers that will be available at the time, it's going to look like a big Trump victory. You're going to see states like Pennsylvania, Virginia, New Mexico, even New Hampshire, and Maine being red. And over the course of the coming days, you're going to see those states start to turn blue. And my biggest prediction is that Pennsylvania is going to be red and then it's going to turn blue. It's going to turn blue, and I believe it will turn blue with the protection of the liberal Supreme Court that won't throw out mail-in votes. And then liberal media will say, yes, look, Pennsylvania has been secured. Biden wins the election. But then I think the sleeper here is going to be Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin, and we're already seeing it now, they're challenging hundreds of thousands of votes. I think Wisconsin is going to remain red
Hmm.
and ultimately be what secures Trump the election.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you think that the red mirage is going to affect even Virginia and New Mexico?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, these are
Yeah.
states that they're close enough where I can confidently say Biden's going to pick them up, but with those election day votes, they're going to look like they're leaning red, I think.
Yeah, sure. And your point about Wisconsin, I can extrapolate out to a lot of the swing states, which is that Trump has a really big advantage on a state level in that in a lot of these states he has this built-in institutional edge given to him by elected Republicans in those states, Republican majorities in the Assembly or the state Supreme Court in North Carolina, Wisconsin, just to name a couple. And these elected state officials have few scruples about maybe tarring their own reputation in the name of a nationwide Trump victory. So I think there you may have a point. I think, in my prediction, in my informal analysis, I think Biden will legitimately win the election. The question is, will Trump illegitimately steal the election?
Yeah.
And I'm a lot more, convinced than most public figures out there that Trump can and will do it. And also, we can't discount him, just from a legitimate standpoint, because the power of incumbency is a tremendous advantage. He controls the government. He controls the institutions. He can shape the way this election goes, and he's already doing it. And when you add on to that the power of Republican incumbency on the state level, he's got a solid institutional edge here.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah,
Overwhelming.
for sure. And also, the polls show a potential Biden landslide, but A lot of people ignore the fact that these polls are very likely, or at least more likely than any other election, to be way off. I mean, people, Trump voters and Trump supporters and people who say or think that Trump is going to win, they say the polls were off in 2016, and that's not really true. I mean, the polls were pretty close. They misallocated where certain popular votes were going to come in certain states, but overall they were pretty close. They were a few thousand votes off in key states. But here, this time, I think the argument is that this time the polls have a great potential to be off, and to be off by a big margin. This is an electoral landscape the likes of which we've never seen before. So that's my informal analysis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have more confidence in the polls now, in the sense that pollsters have adjusted for the secret Trump vote. People who were more shy to admit that they were voting for Trump, as well as his ability to reach out to non-college educated white voters, white male voters specifically. That was his biggest demographic. I think the polls have been better adjusted. I think, like you said, I agree that this is an election to steal, really. And I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but when it involves months and months of undermining a particular form of voting, weakening the apparatus by which those votes would be delivered. I see posts on Twitter every day of mail rooms across the country just absolutely filled to the brim with ballots, and I'm worried, because if those ballots don't make it in time, Brett Kavanaugh said the quiet part out loud. He said any ballots received after, regardless of when they were postmarked, ballots received after Election Day the quote was, could flip the results.
Right.
So there is an intended outcome that the Republican Party wants to maintain. And, Trump masterfully, made this whole argument against mail-in voting, and Democrats Democrats are so brilliant at losing. Democrats foolishly said, no, mail-in voting is safe, knowing damn well they can't protect those votes. Meanwhile, Trump and all of his huge majority of his voters heard the message loud and clear. Yes, sir, we'll vote in person. We won't vote by mail, because we know those are the votes that you're going to try to throw away.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And I don't know if you know this, Joel, but I work in a mailroom here on campus at Haverford.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
So I'm in a Philadelphia.
Geo goes to Haverford.
Yeah.
Haverford.
You're kind of breaking up. Your audio's.
Yeah. Geo goes to Haverford.
Yeah. So I'm in one of the most important parts of the country electorally, right? A Philadelphia suburb, and I work in a mailroom. And yeah, there was chaos. Like, it's overwhelming. We don't have the. I mean, I guess a lot of mailrooms or a lot of delivery services don't have the capacity to handle this surge in mail-in ballots. But there's been an adjustment, and the USPS functions remarkably well given the sabotage by the postmaster and by the Trump administration at large. But despite that, they're already racking up these concerns. They're concern trolling about the legitimacy of something we've had, albeit at a smaller scale, for years. We've had mail-in balloting for years. And every state does it differently. So there's a bunch of confusion among voters um, as to how to participate in the process. And then there's going to be the retroactive sabotage if and when mail-in ballots come in commandingly for Biden. So I do think that that is the biggest question in this election. And if Trump wins, that'll be the reason for sure. So yeah, that I want to transition to talking about. I mean, it might seem obvious, but I want to hear your take on it, Joel,
Yeah.
as to why Biden will win or why Trump will win. I guess a better way of phrasing it is, if Biden wins, why? What were the reasons for his win? And if Trump wins, what were the reasons for his win? What do you think?
Okay. So, as far as Joe Biden, I think the biggest thing that people are worried about is COVID-19, and by extension, the economic situation. Um, I don't think the media is they're really trying to push Joe Biden as the candidate, but there's also a limit that they don't want to reach. Is they don't want to, I guess, make the public too aware of the class solidarity that exists in the sense that prior to the pandemic, 78% of Americans were living paycheck to paycheck. So imagine what that number is now. We live in a climate where billionaires have multiplied their wealth, whereas we're looking at 30 million, I believe is the most recent number, Americans that are vulnerable to evictions. You've got the unemployment benefits that were helping support people through this pandemic just completely cut. We've got a third wave now, and we never really stopped the first one of COVID-19. There's just been a lot of mishandling of things that, if you just look at the global lens, if you look at what's happening in most other countries in the world, is there's just common sense decisions being made. So I think that Joe Biden with COVID-19, he was handed a big sign that was like, see, Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. Trump doesn't know what he's doing. So that's why that's why Joe Biden is going to win the popular vote. That's why he's going to get more people on his side.
Let me ask you a question, real quick. And I know you're not done. I mean, you're not done talking about what you think a Trump win would look like, or what the reasons for it were. But let me ask you, if the election were held right before the pandemic struck, if there were no such thing as COVID-19, and the election were held in, when did COVID-19 strike? I guess the first cases were in January of 2019, but it came to the U.S. in March, right?
Yeah.
So let's say the election were in January 2019. You think Trump would have been reelected if he were running against Biden?
So, like I had mentioned earlier about the media and the way they refrain from talking about certain things, the media entertains the idea that the stock market and employment percentages are a valid indicator of how people are doing, when, if you think critically about it, those aren't valid ways of assessing the health of the American public. So, being that that is the status quo, at that time, yes, Trump could boast record low unemployment rates. We could have a conversation about why it doesn't matter if you've got nearly full employment if people are making just over $7 an hour, or the shitty definition of unemployment, of being unemployed. But I think Trump would have won. I think Trump would have won because Joe Biden cannot, make coherent arguments really for himself. So the universe just had to gift him COVID-19 to make him a fighting candidate.
Yeah.
I don't know if that sounds too cynical, though. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I agree with you. I think. I mean, I'd like to think that Trump would have lost. But the thing is, I think for him to have lost in uh, in the scenario that I outlined, where the country's doing pretty well by mainstream economic metrics, um, I think he would have had to face a, a real populist left candidate. Because, I mean, remember, Trump was the populist candidate in 2016.
Yeah.
The economy was doing pretty well in 2016 in terms of those metrics
Yeah.
that most people talk about, unemployment and stock market. Um, but he was a disruptor, and you'd think, well, if the economy is doing well by these mainstream economic metrics, why would people vote for a disruptor? Why would people vote for a loose cannon? And it's because those metrics don't reflect people's livelihoods. They're good for nothing, except for overpaid economists and opinion journalists at the Wall Street Journal to just encourage more neoliberalism and and structural adjustment at home and abroad. And Trump ran against that status quo. He ran against the economic status quo. He said he would give health care to everybody. He made a lot of vague promises, but he said he would end the wars. He ran against neoliberalism. He ran against neoconservatism. And then, of course, he turned out to be just that same vapid, empty shell politician that he accused Jeb Bush of being, for example. So I think if we did challenge him with someone who had a real solid foundation to stand on, someone with a real record, someone like, I don't know, Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, I kind of like that guy. He's pretty good.
Yeah, that guy sounds good to me.
And if COVID-19, I really believe that if COVID-19 came onto American soil a month or two earlier, that Bernie Sanders would have been the nominee, because you could just see the vindication of his entire platform unfolding.
Absolutely.
The idea of everyone having free healthcare as this pandemic hit us. The fact that he was one of the main people fighting for us to get any kind of stimulus. And this entire time we've gotten one $1,200 check. So people would have been excited to vote for Bernie, knowing that under his presidency there would have been a lot more.
Yeah, and you also saw the upheaval of the establishment and the upheaval of norms that the coronavirus in part brought on. I don't think that it's so crazy to say that the George Floyd protests and the Black Lives Matter protests kind of resulted in part of the skepticism in a lot of our institutions brought on by coronavirus. Coronavirus obviously exposed not only the incompetence, but often the perniciousness and the sinister nature of a lot of our government institutions. And the Black Lives Matter protests, I don't think they were just anti-police brutality. I think on a larger scale, it was a real kind of leftist demand for government to address a lot of these inequities that have been institutionally ingrained. And I think, I totally agree. If COVID had come just a little bit earlier, Bernie Sanders could have ridden that wave of leftist upheaval.
And not in a cynical way either, but
Oh yeah, no, not at all.
yeah, no, in a way that he was already proposing solutions to problems that we had, but people were finally seeing those problems. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, those demands are, they're absolutely essential demands. Like they're not even. I mean, minimum wage, healthcare for all, um, free public college. These are necessities, right? These are just in the spirit of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. We need a bare minimum, and we don't even have that. So yeah, and that's that. Yeah, that's something else I kind of want to talk about. I don't know if you want to keep the focus on the election, um, but at some point, I mean, if not today, at some point, I'd like to talk about informal activism, because I've come to realize the importance of informal activism as a political tool. And I heard this. I forget who it was. It was some conservative dirtbag talking about how he was. I think he was talking in regard to the Black Lives Matter protests, right? And he said, the left couldn't win through politics, so they threw a tantrum and and they started rioting and protesting. But I think that protest movements and informal activism are just the purest form of politics, and the most rare, but the most transformational. I mean, we just look at what happened in Chile. Like that I mean, I am still stunned by what happened in Chile. I guess we still have to see what happens with the rewriting of the Constitution. But I mean, for those who aren't familiar, for all of our audience out there who's not familiar with what happened in Chile.
Yes, for all three of you.
Yeah,
Currently, all three of you.
yeah. Myself, you, and the fake YouTube account that I'm going to use. Chile had a constitution that was written in the 80s under the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet, and even after his deposition, or I guess he was elected, he was voted out of office after a referendum of people decided to hold elections in 1988. That constitution still remained, and it remained up until very recently, up until 2020. And after over a year of sustained protest, the people of Chile finally got to vote on rewriting the Constitution, and they voted overwhelmingly to do so. And they voted overwhelmingly to have an assembly of people, 100% people, or representatives of the people, not politicians, rewrite this Constitution. This was unheard of. This astounded me, and I'm a young guy, so I'm still learning, a bunch of stuff. But when I was younger, let's say when I was 16 or 17 or even 18, I don't know.
Or maybe one might say 19.
Yeah, or 19 and a half. I'm 20 now. You made me lose my train of thought. Yeah. Oh, I didn't have much faith in informal activism. I didn't think. I thought it was like kind of silly, right? Like you go out and you shout a bunch of slogans. Tell me what democracy looks like, and then whatever. And it's just kind of like a silly little charade. But I realize if you have an actual substance behind your protests, and you sustain it, and you're focused in your demands, that it's the most rare form of politics, but it's the purest and the most transformational form of politics. I think that's the future of the left, and I think it's the beginning is now. Like, we're seeing the progressive movement once again getting its foot in the door, we're seeing more progressive candidates get elected. And I think it's because they're riding that crest of the wave of informal activism. It starts with the people who are mobilized and motivated to change this ugly, rank, unfair, corrupt, cruel system that has impoverished so many for so long. So I don't know. I don't know really how to tie that up, but yeah, I guess.
No, we could definitely dive in more into talking about informal activism, but I guess what I can add to that now is that you say that's the future of the left. I agree, but I also see that was the strength of the left always. I mean, thinking back to the civil rights movement was a leftist led movement. You had Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, who were socialists. And they were not just calling for an end to police brutality, but they were calling for increased wages. They were advocating for workers' rights. You go back earlier than that, and you've got an era of unions fighting in the 20s and 30s and into the 40s. And what comes of it but the election of FDR, who's the most progressive president we've seen. Something else that doesn't get talked
Not
about
after
enough.
not after Biden gets elected.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. In the words of Donald Trump, yeah, he's a radical Marxist.
yeah, yeah. There you go. Yeah,
And
yeah,
look, man,
man.
don't tempt me with a good time. Don't tempt me with a good time. But
Right.
something that doesn't get talked about enough as a leftist movement is the abolition of slavery. Slave abolitionists were considered radical because they wanted to come for what was at the time one of the biggest forms of industry. And our country went to war over that.
Yeah,
That's how powerful that movement was. And we
yeah,
look back at it now and we're like, we don't think of it that way because it was such a common sense thing. And I guess that's what being on the right side of history means.
sure, sure. Um, the reason I say it's the future of the left is not to disregard the past of the
Oh
left.
no, 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 no.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there's the cycle of history. Everyone knows that, and I think the cycle of history is kind of spinning more and more in tight orbit. Uh, so I think we're seeing like this very quick repetition of the rise of progressivism and then the reaction of neoliberalism, and then this kind of tug of war. Um, but yeah, all I was trying to indicate was that I do think that history will inevitably repeat itself.
Yeah.
Just like the coming of the seasons. I mentioned that Lula quote that I'm so fond of. They can kill a flower or two or three or 100, but they will never stop the coming of spring. And it speaks to not only the cyclical nature of leftist politics globally, but also to the force of a movement powered sorry powered by
Nice. Nice.
powered by the working class. We're gonna edit that out. We're gonna edit that voice crack out. I
Yeah,
will not.
the editor will take care of
Yeah,
that.
the editor. Yeah, I will. I won't have my reputation tarnished by a voice crack. I won't be brought down. My political opponents will use that voice crack against me for
And they
decades.
he was right about, he was right about the election, but that voice crack, we can't.
Yeah, no, you can't listen to that guy. Um, anyway, so let's go back to your map here because you think
Yeah, I
Trump is going to
mean,
win.
yeah, so you had asked me if Biden wins why, if Trump wins why, and I gave you my Biden answer. I think that Um, you make the most important arguments to people right now. And even if normally, for whatever reason, they might not support a Democrat, it's just a matter of someone who's going to handle COVID and the economy. There are also a lot of people who care about the integrity of the courts. Um, um, Gio and I, a good friend of ours, voted for the first time because that was something that resonated with him, with that friend of ours, and I think that's something that's resonating with a lot of people is seeing the Supreme Court and the fact that there is this third branch of government that's just being completely corrupted.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know if enough people pay attention or care. Like, I mean, it's a very blatant corrupt thing that the
It was the
Republicans did.
fastest appointment in history.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, everyone knows. Everyone who's paying attention, I should say, knows that these people are slimy, sleazy political hacks who are just trying to institutionalize corporate greed for generations, but or I guess further institutionalize it. But I don't think that's really a main concern for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people just don't really pay attention, or they just don't think the courts are that or are that important because the courts really don't uh, enter into the public field of awareness that often for many people to think it's so influential, even though it is. But yeah, I guess it could be a concern. But I think your points about COVID and the economy are way more salient.
Okay.
But yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I interrupted you again.
No, yeah, you're good. You're good. So,
Okay.
yeah, those are definitely, I think, and the poll data shows that too, is COVID and the economy are what are overwhelmingly getting people to vote. That, and a lot of people, you ask them, are you voting more because you like Biden or you're anti-Trump? And there's so many people who just are so sick of Trump that they're voting. So I definitely think the popular vote is going to have, there's more people that are going to vote for Biden than voted for Hillary. There's the whole, we had 4 years of Trump thing. There's the whole, you can say Joe Biden is more likable than Hillary Clinton for a variety of reasons, but Hillary Clinton's not relevant to this election. But
Hillary
I would say
Clinton.
for Trump. Oh no, go ahead. You had
No, you
something
go
to
ahead.
say
No,
about
no, no, no,
Madam
no, no.
President.
No. For the longest time we had a little magnet on our fridge with a picture of Hillary Clinton that said Madam President. I mean, ever since like
Oh, I'm still with her. I actually vote in Florida, and I wrote her in.
oh
I
yeah,
wrote her in this election in Florida.
you took a trip down to Florida
Yeah, I
to
committed
do
voter fraud in Florida
oh there
for
you go.
legal reasons. This is a joke.
That's your leftist duty. That's your
Yeah.
duty as a leftist. I'm going to vote twice here in Pennsylvania. I'm going to go down to North Carolina where my grandma lives and vote a couple times there. And maybe while I'm down there, I'll hitch a ride to Florida and do my civic duty as a leftist there.
Yeah.
Um, no, but yeah, we had a
Oh no, and
magnet.
then of course, we eat hot chip and burn down a building.
What is hot chip?
You're not familiar with eat hot well, I'll
Is that an
I'll
internet
tell you
thing?
about it off camera. I'll tell you about it off camera. It's a
We're
it's
not on camera.
it's an That's a good point. It's an internet meme. So there's this thing called the internet, right?
Yeah, I heard of it.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about it later.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about it later.
But,
Um,
but
I,
Um, I Donald Trump. I hate to sound like those clips that you see of Trump supporters at rallies saying, "Well, if Trump doesn't win, it's because the liberals stole the election." Um, but I mean, if Trump wins, he kind of did steal the election. Let's look at Florida, for example. People are really grinding to flip Florida blue. It's an important state. Trump has to win Florida in order to win the election. Um, earlier in this year there was a amazing, Supreme Court ruling that, or no, there was a ballot measure that was going to allow convicted felons to retain their right to vote. It was going to restore their right to vote.
And I want to interject here
Yeah.
because we should give Michael Bloomberg credit. I mean, he's an odious guy, and and we despise him with every fiber of our being. But as I recall, he paid off like the
Oh yeah, Mini
the
Mike. Mini Mike.
right, yeah, Mini Mike, bite-sized Mike paid off the debts, or bite-sized Bloomberg, I guess. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Trump should use that one.
Stop it.
Ah, man. Yeah, bite-sized Bloomberg paid off the debts of a bunch of felons so that they could vote for Joe Biden, presumably. I mean, I guess it was the least he could do, but credit where credit is due. Anyway, continue.
Well, I remember there was a Supreme Court ruling that said that the ballot measure apparently had to pass twice in order for it to be into effect. So I
Why?
don't know how
Why?
that stands now. Um, oh yeah, just because voter suppression.
Really?
But
I'm gonna look into that.
yeah, I I looked into that a little bit more too. That's what I last remember happening. But anyway, there are a lot of efforts to actively suppress the vote in Florida, as there have been for a long time. So I see Florida staying red like it was before. As for Texas, um, a lot of outlets are showing Texas as a toss-up for the first time, and the demographics in Texas are, growing to a point where it will soon be a comfortable blue state. But I don't know if you heard about. I think it was 125,000 drive-through ballots are being brought up to the Supreme Court to be invalidated. The argument being that that's not a valid way to vote. And I mean, the Supreme Court is definitely going to throw those votes out. The question is, will those people get a chance to vote again? We know those are overwhelmingly going to be blue votes. So we could kiss Texas goodbye for the Democrats.
Yep.
I mean, just looking at the map that I have here, my prediction map. There's people hoping that Georgia can be turned. I don't see that happening. There's been a lot of money poured into South Carolina to unseat Lindsey Graham, and I don't see that happening either. And I don't know. What do you think about that? I'm just listing off states at this point, but these are states where there's a long history of voter suppression.
I'm mainly in agreement with you on South Carolina and Georgia and Texas because simply because of their recent history as red states, and also just the aptitude of the elected officials statewide in those states to suppress turnout either as it's happening or retroactively. And then, in Georgia, obviously, we saw the purging of voter rolls in the 2018 gubernatorial election, and a bunch of voter suppression there. And, I mean, indeed, in a lot of these southern red states, there has been, I mean, one likes to think that the trend is towards democracy in a lot of these states, but there is a sinister history of voter suppression of blacks in these states. I mean, dating back to, Reconstruction, of course, and the legacy has not been remedied, ameliorated, or wiped away to this day. So I tend to agree with you in the case of South Carolina, Georgia, and Texas. Um, but you put North Carolina red here, and I want to hear your thoughts about that because I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure about that. I think North Carolina can go blue. I think it will go blue. That's what I'm leaning towards. So let me hear your thoughts on that.
All right, let me pull up the numbers on North Carolina here. Um, okay, so at present, Biden has a two looks like a 2% lead in North Carolina, and any lead of any lead where it's considered it's a toss up or it's 2 or 3 points, I see that as comfortably, or not comfortably, hyperbole. I see that as in the hands of Trump, because what I don't think polls account for is if these people will even get the chance to vote.
Yeah,
So
and
I look at polls and then I do a mental calculation of like, all right, let me take a look at the makeup of their state Supreme Court. Let me see what their state legislature looks like. Let's see who the local representatives are. Um, if it's not a big enough margin, it's not flipping in my mind. So
yeah, you're being very conservative with it, and I guess I have the same instinct. I do think,
well, I think we're all kind of scarred from 2016.
yeah, definitely, definitely,
Everything was talking about Hillary's 90% chance of winning. The lowest end was a 70% chance of winning, but what happened, and part of that is because there was miscalculation. Part of that is people did turn out more than expected for Trump, but part of that then and now, far more so, is the ability for one of the two biggest political um, groups, parties. The Republican Party is massive. They're going to weaponize that power, I
hmm,
believe, and get votes to not be counted.
yeah, definitely. What's the margin in Florida? How much? What's the lead? But
Let's see.
of Biden there,
So
like
let's see.
four points,
Let
three
me
points.
let me refresh 538 here. Um, so 538 says Florida is leaning Biden, 48.4% to 50.9. So that
Oh
is just
wow,
under 2%.
wow, that's much closer than I thought it was. Yeah, I think I actually do think Trump's going to win Florida. I mean, part of that is because like when uh, uh, in 2018 when they were having their gubernatorial election there, I thought for sure Gillum was going to win because he actually had a lot of energy in his campaign, and he was polling relatively well compared to DeSantis, and then and also I mean Bill Nelson, the senator, the incumbent senator, Democrat from Florida, was also polling ahead of Rick Scott, um, and then both Democrats lost their campaigns. And Biden, I mean, he has nowhere near the same energy behind him in Florida. And if Trump's socialist attacks are going to work anywhere, I think it's going to be in Florida because of all the Cubanos. And
Yeah.
Joel, you're a Cubano, so
Yeah,
you want to
I
talk about your community a little bit?
oh man. Oh man, that's that look, man, there's a saying, you give them a boat and they give you a vote. And unfortunately, a lot of my fellow Cubanos have gone down this path. Now, if you look at the demographics, young Cubans, whether they're white or black Cubans, young Cubans are overwhelmingly progressive. But it's the older Cubans, and it's a lot of the ones who um, they're their fathers or their mother, their father's family business was taken away from them by Fidel Castro, but that business was a casino or a plantation or not in all
Mm.
cases. I don't want to generalize about everyone, but
Can you talk about your family? If you, I mean,
yeah, I could talk a little bit about my family.
like, what's their what? I'm just curious as to their relationship with Cuba, with the homeland. You
Okay.
know, it must be a complicated relationship.
Yeah, well, on both sides, I've got family from Cuba. So my dad immigrated directly from Cuba in the 80s. He came on the Mareo boat lift, and he came because he wanted economic opportunity. This American dream. Um, Come to find out that his American dream was simply to have a kid here who would have a chance at getting the American dream, as is the case for many immigrants
Look where
who
you are,
come
man.
here. Yeah, yeah, I'm on
The
the
Geo and
Geo
Joel
and
show.
Joel podcast. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'm going
you've
places.
made it. You made it. Okay,
But
go on.
he doesn't have this discontent for Cuba, and I mean he's a black Cuban, so he does acknowledge that a lot was done for racial equity in the country. I mean, it's difficult to talk about the positives and negatives of Cuba because there were good things that came out of it, and then there were also, there are bad things as well. It's a very complex thing to dive into, but what I will say is that, he always did acknowledge that there was like deep racial inequality before the revolution and before Castro took power. Um, and I don't think he's not someone that hates Cuba. He's not someone that loves Castro, but I think he is someone that respects at least the early vision of Fidel.
Yeah, going back to what you said about, I mean, you mentioned the obvious that there were some good things and some bad things coming out of socialist government in Cuba. What I hate most about reactionaries, I guess on the left and the right, but mostly the right in the United States, political reactionaries, uh, when they're talking about Cuba or when they're talking about any number of leftist governments in history around the world, they use these countries as a prop, and they don't validate or regard um, the nuances of any government, of any state. Uh, so they'll say, well, you want the U.S. to be like Venezuela. What does that mean? What does it mean for the U.S. to be like Venezuela, right? I mean, they don't, and when I mean, I've never seen them go into more detail on what that is. If they're pressed on it, well,
Oh no, they go into detail. They say, "Oh, you want us to eat rats?"
that's exactly what I was going to say. Right. When they're pressed on it, they say, well, you want people in the United States to eat rats, like in Venezuela. They don't have water, they eat rats. Uh, but they never acknowledge that there's nuance. And something I find curious is I don't really hear people talking about Cuba like that. Like they always refer to Venezuela. Do you ever hear people saying you want the U.S. to be like Cuba?
It's hard for them to do. I think Venezuela is just the easier one because they're the hot scapegoat right now.
Yeah,
But as far as the successes of Cuba, I mean, you have to look at the healthcare system there, the education system there, the way that almost everyone was illiterate, and then in 15 years' time, almost everyone was literate.
yeah, for sure. And I mean they have a huge like aid program. I mean for such a small country, they have a really outsized influence on the world, and a bunch of countries, especially developing countries, import their doctors from Cuba. So in a lot of ways, yeah, they are a benevolent force. Brazil, before Bolsonaro, imported a bunch of doctors from Cuba, and Brazil is, I mean, a South American behemoth, and Cuba is like it's this tiny country, and before the socialist revolution, it was really, I mean, it was really nothing. It was just this kind of sugar plantation
Well, it was,
uh,
yeah, it was a sugar farm, and it was
for the United States.
the Las Vegas of the of the Caribbean.
Yeah, it was owned by the mobsters, and then you fast forward, and then suddenly they cut themselves off completely from the United States um, after 1959, and and they even managed to thwart hundreds of assassination attempts on the leader and uh, an invasion of their country. It's really astonishing um, what the Cubans were able to do, but it's socialism and the left is not the same everywhere, and it's not all bad, and it's
And
definitely not all good.
they call out issues like in Venezuela's case. You're calling out a government that did enact socialist policies, but like you said, it's more nuanced. They're just saying, okay, that must be the reason why things went south. They're not considering the fact that okay, let's look deeper. Let's the scientific method says, okay, you might have found an answer, but you have to test and keep looking for other answers and test them all. So let's see, what was the primary um, export was oil. Venezuela relied heavily on oil, and then what happened just before their economy tanked? Well, the price of oil dropped dramatically. What was happening as the economy was tanking? Well, rich people and elites, something that elites and rich people, something that people they say, like, I see this conservative argument against socialism. Well, that they'll say that just means the elites have all the money, which is antithetical to socialism. But
Right,
in
and
Venezuela, the elites, they took advantage of this broken currency exchange system where there was a standard exchange rate that everyone had from the Venezuelan currency to U.S. dollars, but then the government had a subsidized rate for connected officials. And what these elites were doing was they would exchange with the general public and get all of this Venezuelan currency and then sell it back to the government to the point where they looted the treasury and then they left.
yep, and that's not socialism. Um, and that's the trouble with the socialist label is that uh, there's this perception that socialism is bad. But the thing is, I mean, and this was a conversation we've had before. I think we talked about this like a week ago. Socialism, the moniker, has been co-opted or appropriated rather by people, I mean, from all different political persuasions. Uh, you know, obviously you hear this just this boorish attack from right wingers that the Nazis were socialist. Well, they call themselves the National Socialist Party, but they weren't socialist. Like socialism actually means something. It's more than just a name or a label. I mean, you see it all the time. You see it today. I told you this before. Bolsonaro's party is called the Social Liberal Party. Socialism is nothing more than a term. You have to look into what it really means. You can't just say socialism is bad because bad people call themselves socialists. That's just a very stupid, asinine way of thinking that isn't going to lend you any perspective into how the world really works or into how politics really works on a global or localized scale.
Yeah, you've got to boil it down to the policies. You have to see what policies they're working on.
For sure. And I
So
do think that, listen, you and I probably do have some disagreements on the minutia of socialism.
Yeah.
You're probably to my left. I mean, you are, right? Um,
No, I'm
eh,
very right wing.
right. Yeah.
Because of the how the horseshoe theory works is that since I'm to your left, I'm also to your right.
To my right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you surround me on both sides. Um, I'm like an island in the ocean, and you're my ocean. You're my ocean. my my azure, beautiful yet dangerous ocean. Um, what was I? What was I
I
trying to
think
say?
you started romancing me and you forgot your train
Yeah,
of thought.
yeah, that often happens. Uh, I was saying that you and I disagree on a lot of socialist policy when it comes down to the minutia. I do think that there is like a threshold for how far left you can go, and but I also think it depends on the point in historical time in which you're operating, and I I think it depends on um, the context in which you're operating, like just the governmental context, what country you're in. I also it has a lot to do with just the culture of your people. Um, so I do think there is a time and place for certain reforms, um, but for all intents and purposes, I am on the left, um, even though I think leftists do fuck up by going too far left. But it's a good instinct to be far left or to be extremist, if
Mhm.
only to push the Overton window in our direction. You know?
But yeah, it's something along the lines of what you said about in the context of your government and as far as being practical and pragmatic um,
Right.
is that there's a difference. I believe there is a difference between having beliefs. I have beliefs that would make it, that Joe Biden would never be someone I would vote for, and then I have a way that I want to practically achieve my goals. And a part of that is I believe that it's easier to fight a neoliberal than someone who is pushing the brink of fascism.
Yep. And I want to ask you, just as a way to, well, I just want to get your insight into the accelerationist theory.
Oh,
You,
I think it's garbage.
you think it's go,
Yeah,
but I'd agree with
accelerating
you.
the death camps.
No, I agree.
Accelerating the death camps.
I totally agree with you, but
No, go ahead.
I want to know if you think that there's any merit to that, even though we're both in agreement that it's better to vote for someone who is at least nominally to the left of uh, Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Uh,
No. I think simply because the Republican Party is so great at holding on to power once they have it that, the last thing I want to do is give it to them in the hopes that I would change people's minds. Because even if that may be the case, 4 years from now, they'll be even better at suppressing votes. And also, on the other hand, where people want a revolution, the left is not ready for a revolution right now. Look at who has all the guns. Okay, you've got one side that's protesting on the streets and is spray painting stuff, and then you got another side that's marching through the streets, with like 5 rifles slung over their shoulders. So as it stands right now, we will be killed if we try to accelerate anything.
yeah, it's true.
I I'm no coward, but I'm also not an idiot either, and I
Right.
know that they've got a lot more guns than we do.
Yeah, yeah, and they're way more willing
I want to
to
reach them by ideology and solidarity than by force, because
yeah,
I know that
agreed,
by force is not going to be a good option.
agreed. And I have a lot of problems with the Second Amendment, but I think as long as we have it, and we're going to have it for quite a while, and it doesn't look as if there's going to be much in the way of gun control in our country for quite a while. Um, we need to arm in that time. We just need to prepare for the worst. And also, if the left uh, guns up, and if the left embraces uh, the Second Amendment, and especially if black and brown people start proudly carrying guns, I mean, is there any is there
Oh man, the second that happens, you're gonna see Republican senators being the most anti-gun people.
I mean, yeah, there's no better way to get them more scared than to arm the left and to arm black and brown people.
Look,
um,
when I turn 21, I'm gonna apply to own a gun in New York. Um, Other states are different, so for those who do not know, I go to Middlebury College in Vermont, and in Vermont, the gun laws there are well, there are basically none. So when I
how
was
old do you have to be in Vermont?
um,
18?
18, yeah,
Okay.
18 to own. But people younger than that, they just go shooting. I mean, it's Vermont. Like, no, who's
Yeah.
what one police officer is gonna?
You should get your license in Vermont, because in New York it's gonna be
Yeah, oh no,
impossible.
I'm good.
Oh, you have
I
one?
took a course when I was 18, and that Vermont is where I had gone shooting for my first time. Um, but yeah, I want to get better at it. Vermont's realistically the place where I'll be able to train and get some competency at it. And then New York, where I see myself living for the foreseeable future, um, is where I ultimately want to have a firearm in my possession. I mean, hey, it's my constitutional right.
Yeah. I think it's gonna be tough for you in New York City. I mean, I
Oh,
think
yeah,
they're
there's no way. Yeah, I won't be able to carry one around, is the
right.
thing. But I might be able to get a license to have a pistol in my household, and that's what I want.
Okay. I think only like 50,000 people in New York City have gun licenses, and they're probably mostly police. Um, I think it'll be really tough for you, and I think that's a good thing. I don't trust you with a gun, but
But I mean, you're in favor of gun control, and I am too. I believe that there should be, common sense gun control. There should be background checks. Um, there should be some standard of qualification across the entire country. But and I mean, I guess this touches on issues that neither president, neither party are considering at all. I think the best form of gun control right now at our disposal is to end the drug war and to not just decriminalize but legalize drugs. And that unlocks a whole chain of events where we get rid of issues with cartels and issues with gang violence, and that's what gets guns off the street. Because Republicans like to talk about,
good
oh,
point, my friend.
Chicago. Oh, they're like, oh, Chicago. Oh, gun control doesn't stop illegal guns. Even though these are people who a gang has never gone to their house. One of these "don't tread on me" guys has never had a gang member come to their house. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and I think there is merit to that. I think yeah, if you're a rich and powerful country like the U.S., and especially if you have such hemispheric influence as we do, and I mean the narco economy in the Western Hemisphere revolves around the United States. Without the United States and without willing consumers here, uh, the narco economy would not exist as we know it. Um, so I think there is real merit to legalizing drugs. I mean, Portugal decriminalized all drugs, and and they're the fourth safest country in the world. Um,
They're also the home of Cristiano Ronaldo. So
yeah, yeah.
is
It's
that? I don't think that's a coincidence.
no, it's not. It's definitely not.
Uh,
um,
no,
but
but it does that, and then also, I mean, an issue that people seem to care about a lot is, there's a lot of immigrants coming at our border.
right, you're not going to
But
have those guys.
yeah, there won't be any cartels to flee if the cartels are killed off, not by us invading and toppling these countries, but simply by shutting off their businesses.
Right, and we also, I mean, we have to like give a lot of aid to support governments who are like in total crisis because of the narco economy and because of the drug trade that is funneled mostly from like Colombia through Central America into the United States. And the interesting thing about your homeland, Cuba, or your dad's homeland, Cuba.
And my mom's too.
Oh,
I
really?
never got to my mom's story, but yeah,
Oh, I
yeah,
thought she was Puerto
my
Rican.
mom was born here, but my mom's dad was born there.
Oh,
His his whole family came um, right after the right after the revolution.
I never knew that. I thought she was just Puerto Rican, but she's half.
She's half
Or
Puerto Rican and half Cuban.
okay, got it. Well, the interesting thing about Cuba in terms of the drug trade is that you notice no drugs are funneled through Cuba because they, uh, at least in some respects, uh, they have very strong institutions. Their government is relatively strong, and it's the same with Nicaragua, although to a lesser extent. But the U.S. plays a big role in assisting Latin American economies and governments so that their institutions can resist the influence and the power of the cartels. Uh, and that's, I mean, the U.S. has just for so long just neglected entirely its duty uh, towards the rest of Latin America. I mean, we we decimated a bunch of these economies just through uh, neocolonialism and our imperialist tendencies. And then when they developed, or when certain countries developed into havens for narco traffickers, we totally neglected our responsibility to aid these governments that we had a hand in weakening, um, and then we blamed them for immigration into our country. So it's a total mess, and the U.S. has for too long just scapegoated other countries for whatever reason. But I guess decriminalizing or legalizing all drugs. I mean, it's a radical proposal, but you do need something like to change very radically um, for these issues to stop, because I mean, drugs is a very profitable business, and the U.S. Is a very rich donor in many ways to that business. Um, so yeah, decriminalizing at least I'd say um, is a good step when paired with giving a bunch of institutional aid to countries like Guatemala and Honduras, um, and other Central American and Caribbean countries. But why do you say legalize instead of decriminalize?
So this is my libertarian sense kicking in. I believe that people should, have the free will to, as long as it's not doing harm to anybody else, they should have the freedom to do it themselves. Um,
Yeah, that's fair.
is it a good thing? No. And so I believe that there should be rehab, available. I mean, there's in Philadelphia actually. There's a program that I've heard about that I think is really cool, called Prevention Point, and one of the main services that they provide, I don't know if it's the main, but it's one of the services that they provide, is a safe space for people to use their drug. It's a clean environment. There are medical professionals and volunteers there. um, there's counseling, there's help, but in the meantime, like, people aren't just going to quit cold turkey. So there's a place where, at the very least, you're monitoring them and they're not overdosing and they feel safe, and they're not in, because people, especially like homeless people, where they go to unsafe places to use drugs, and that's where you have a lot of, crime and um, death take place. But I think legalization is important because, um, I don't know. I think we stigmatize substance use in certain ways, but not in others. Cigarettes are legal, and right now, it's more illegal to smoke weed than it is to smoke tobacco. So I think that legality is just a social construct, and we have the ability to determine, well, are we going to go down the line of, are we going to ban things that are harmful for you and ban cigarettes outright, or are we going to allow you to do whatever the hell you want, but also have means to support you in your process of getting off those things if you start doing them. So with tobacco, you've got, you know, nicotine patches and Nicorette gum, and so many resources to help people quit smoking. And that's a similar way that we can, and I think should, be treating other drugs.
Let me ask you something. Um, do you think the government should become like a vendor of drugs, and or you know what? Do you think? No, screw that. Scrap it. Scrap it. Bad question.
No, 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 no. If I
No,
if I may if I could reconstruct that question
no,
actually
no, no. You're not
for
gonna do that.
you.
No,
Oh no, I'm not allowed,
no,
because
not
it
allowed.
made me think of something. But
Okay, okay. Go ahead. What
I
are you
thought
thinking of?
about legal marijuana in dispensaries. And I mean, look, you know how, like, I mean, I don't know if you've got your weed man, and I don't either, right? I don't, do anything illegal. I've never broken the law.
Right, me neither.
Um, but I think it would be really good if the government gave licenses to people who were already selling drugs in the first place, or growing them, like growing weed, right? Like people who are growing and selling weed, instead of these corporate dispensaries popping up. Because if these are going to be new legal industries, in the same way that the Green New Deal, right? That's a piece of legislation that says we're going to transition away from fossil fuels and towards solar and clean energy, but we're also going to make those worker owned. And we're going to keep that from becoming another source of monopoly. That's something that I would want to see, with drugs.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. I mean, I agree that you still have to like protect small businesses. Um,
Look, your guy on the corner, he's a small business. Whether and it could be funny to think of it that way, but I
yeah.
mean that's somebody who is, exercising labor, providing a good, and using the capital from that to make a living.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So there should be that transition or that transitory process in place.
Protect
But
small businesses.
yeah, but I mean, there are also cases where you have drug traffickers who are violent criminals. So what would you do in that case? I mean, would you protect those guys? I mean, I guess if they're violent criminals, you would prosecute them for other crimes.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah. The question I was gonna ask you is if the government legalizes and sanctions all drugs, um, do you think that that would result in more people buying drugs? I mean, that's the argument, isn't it? Or at least that's part of it. That the government, in legalizing and sanctioning drugs, um, would be condoning drug use in some way, or it would take away it would offer less risk to people who might want to try drugs, but if it's not legal, they're not willing to risk getting punished for the thrill of using. So, what do you think? Do you think we would see an uptick in drug use, or if
No,
not, why?
not very little. I think very little. And the reason being is because for many people, drug use is already legal. Not officially, but I mean, people can pretty much access any drug anyway. Um, they just need a place to do it in secret. What this does is, I mean, that this gets into the issues of over policing, right? Where you've got police stopping and frisking and patting down people and pulling people over and going to areas specifically targeting
Yeah,
groups.
but hold on. You say okay, yeah. You say it's officially legal for some people. I mean, as long as they do it in
No,
secret.
unofficially legal.
I mean, yeah, unofficially. My bad. Um, but I mean, you can say that about any number of crimes. Like stealing is unofficially legal for those people who get away with it, right? I mean, do you think if we
Exactly.
do you think if we legalized stealing, um, like I guess it wouldn't be stealing. Okay. Do you think if we legalized stealing?
That's a false equivalency
Okay.
because
Why?
one is, could only harm yourself and one is directly harming another person.
Okay,
So I
but
don't see
the
those as similar
purpose
levels of crime.
the purpose of the
And you got to
analogy.
look at the rates too, right?
No, and I
The
agree
rate
with
of
you.
the rates at which those things occur, it's not happening at the same rate.
Okay. I guess that second point you made is more cogent because the purpose of my analogy um, it wasn't to say that one it wasn't to pass a value judgment on one in comparison to the other, right? Like I agree
Okay.
that
Yeah.
that committing a crime that harms other people is worse than committing a crime that only harms yourself. The purpose of the analogy was to draw attention to this point that like, do you think that um, rates of this crime would increase if it were legalized?
Okay. So I guess I would say very little amount of people would be swayed because I mean, I myself, I have no interest in, say, trying heroin. I'm just not interested. I don't think you're interested either. And if it were legalized, I still am not interested. Why? Because I'm educated on the effects of it. So if I know what it's going to do, I'm not interested. I mean, my whole life, cigarettes have been legal. And, I know a lot of people who smoke. I say a lot, that's an exaggeration. I know a decent amount of people who smoke, and it sucks. But I have never felt the need to do it. And and in Vermont, for example, right? So Vermont's a state that you had to be 18 years old to buy tobacco products, but they changed it to 21. All the same people still smoke. All the same people still smoke. You're going to find a way to do it whether or not. It's like with abortions, for instance, you ban abortions, but people will still do it behind the scenes. Like if somebody wants to do it, they're going to find a way to do it. And making it legal, making something legal doesn't incentivize it being done. What incentivizes something being done is either not informing people on it, spreading misinformation, or some kind of marketing. I because like marketing and advertising is misinformation. It's companies trying to get us, is convincing us that it is in our interest to purchase their product. Yeah, I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but
Yeah, no, but I take your point. I see it, and I tend to agree with you actually on this issue, even though I challenge you a little bit. Although this is an issue
as you
where,
should, as you
yeah,
should.
yes, this is an issue where I guess I can be swayed a little bit. I don't know if I necessarily believe in legalization of all drugs, but you can definitely convince me of it. Um, you could also
And
definitely
you said
convince.
you're in favor of decriminalization, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
isn't that, I feel like that's your stance on it.
yeah.
And I'm happy with that stance too. Like, I think no one should be thrown in jail for, you know, using a drug.
Right.
We can talk about selling it, but using it, no. Like,
I have an instinct similar to yours in most respects, and I also have that socially libertarian tendency um, to say that as long as something doesn't affect anyone else, uh, you're good to go, right? So where do that leads me to my next question for you, which is like, where do you draw the line? What would you legalize everything um, that only applies to like the individual and doesn't apply to their environment or other people? Like for example, um, would you legalize? I don't know. This is a bad example. I'm just drawing a blank. But suicide, I know I would. Right.
so we're talking like
I
medically
guess.
assisted suicides, or like
Yeah. Yeah. I guess medically assisted suicide.
um ultimately, yeah. I mean, I think there should be an assessment done on that person's decision making ability before they do it. You know, like that they're of themselves, that they know what they're asking for, and in most cases that's because it's somebody who's enduring a lot of pain. They're terminally ill, and they want mercy.
I
But yeah,
agree.
I think, I think it should be I think it should be a right. I mean, you have a right to your own life.
I agree. What about incest? Consensual incest.
I'm definitely against it, but I'm trying to think of a good way to put it into words. I just gotta, immediately throw out that I'm against it
Oh, yeah. You know what? While you
before
think,
because I don't want to leave a long pause, right? And then someone no, because then what if someone's listening and they're like, he's kind of thinking about that for a little bit too long.
dead
Eh,
air.
So
Yeah.
immediately, no.
Wait, hold on. Let me.
Um,
I want to say. I want to say my thing. I want to give you some time to think about what you're gonna say.
yeah.
So, so I'll just tell you what my position is on it. Um,
Okay.
I mean, it's a controversial opinion, but I think if it's I think if it's a consensual relationship, I mean, I don't see why um, I don't see why the government should interfere with that. Like I'm pretty socially libertarian in that respect. Although I definitely discourage uh, people who are related from engaging in sexual congress with each other. Um, I think I think it's their right. Like
I just,
it's not. Hold on, wait, let me finish. I have a bunch to get out here. I want to. I just don't think it. It just doesn't affect other people. Now, if they're having babies, that's a different story because incest babies, you know, tend to be deformed or have some genetic problems. So I guess that's a different conversation. And I really don't know my stance on letting incest couples have children. But
yeah, that's what comes to my head is,
right,
the health and the potential for illness and deformities, and so that does harm a human being because when
Yeah,
that child is born,
right.
they are
In like a much more fundamental way. And but I also do want to point out that my grandparents on my father's side were cousins. They were first cousins once removed. Um, but they were Italian, so it's okay. It happens all the time.
the entire British royal family is,
Yeah, right, right.
they're just all inbred.
Yeah, that's why all Brits have bad teeth. Anyway, do you want to articulate why you're against incest?
So, I guess if somebody wants to, do whatever they want to do in their private life, I mean, look, they're gonna do it, right? Um, but I think if it gets into the public for some reason, because it's only enforceable if it becomes public somehow, or if they had a child, you know, I don't. Those aren't people you put in jail. That's someone that needs probably some psychological help, because you and I and anyone listening to this can say it is not rational for us to procreate with our siblings or our close relatives. I mean, look, if someone's like your second or third cousin and you didn't know and you find out like, oh shit, like we're like distantly related. I mean, look, it just happens, like especially in similar ethnic communities. You talked about Italians, but any ethnic community, it's just gonna happen, and there's nothing you can do about it. But
Yeah,
someone who you know is like your first cousin, for instance, like you can probably say, all right, look, there's there's a large sea of billions of other people out there. I probably shouldn't settle for my direct relative.
but what if she's like an 8?
Now that okay, fine. The law will exception. Eight's and up.
Eight's and up. Eight's and
Eight's and
up.
up. Eight's and
Um,
up. And it's
yeah. No, yeah, yeah, that's a good compromise. I think we could work with that. um,
what's interesting is on what seems on the surface as like a silly discussion is like a type of policy discussion that, because we talked about Trump and Biden and the election, but we haven't talked about what those results mean really. And one thing it doesn't mean is any conversation like that. Like in other countries around the world, they're having, because they're on the same page on the common sense stuff like COVID-19 bad. So they don't need to talk about, like, they're not talking about in other countries if climate change is real or not. So they
yeah.
can talk about stuff like this, but we can't in this country.
Yeah, that's fucking depressing. Uh, yeah, it's a good point. And I
So I
mean,
got some questions for you.
oh yeah, wait, hold on. I have one more question for you.
Okay.
Just quickly. What about polygamy?
I didn't watch the show, but I saw this YouTube video about like a show where this guy had multiple wives. Um, it was pretty baller, man. It's
Yeah,
pretty baller.
it's pretty baller.
Um,
The thing is, like,
I think
oftentimes,
as long as you guys aren't like producing like inbred babies or something,
mm,
do what you want. I mean, marry whoever you want or however many people you want.
yeah, I agree. But yeah, the thing to be careful with around that is that, like, a lot of times it's abusive, or or it's cultish or whatever. So there are tricky issues, um, just in that environment, in that context. But
I
I
like the
do.
Mormons.
Right, yeah. Yeah, like the Mormons. um, but also, yeah, like a bunch of cults in the 70s and 60s, um, that were polygamous. I mean, oftentimes, like, these cults uh, tend to be polygamous. I think it's probably just because, like, the cult leader has an ego trip, and he decides, well, I mean, I might as well use this to my advantage. And
Let me just start bunking everybody.
right, exactly. Um, but on principle, I think consensual adults should be able to do that kind of stuff. Uh, It's their right. It's their privacy. Okay, you have some questions for me. I'm
Yeah,
excited. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I want to reel us back. I think a good way to bring us back to the discussion we've been having is we've been talking about change, right? Um, Legalizing or decriminalizing drugs would be a significant change, um, as would polygamy. That would be a change.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you if and what changes would happen under a Biden election or a Trump reelection. I want to give you, the floor to reflect on that, and also just like how you feel about that personally too, not just like what you think is going to happen, but also like how does that make you feel as an American citizen?
Okay. Good question. And your audio also got better momentarily there. So,
How's
oh,
my audio
oh my
been
God!
during this?
Now it's really loud. um, it's been.
Have I been
Oh my
audible?
God!
Because
Yeah,
I've been looking at the audio track,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and I can't tell how loud I am,
Now
but
you're really loud. You're really loud now.
all right, because I was figuring I could just change it in post.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can edit it later.
But as
Uh,
long as you've been able to hear me fine, that's
yeah,
all that matters.
I've been hearing you. I guess, according to the audio track, you're a little bit.
It looks like I'm whispering.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It looks like I'm shouting and you're whispering. Now it looks like you're shouting as well. Um, but I guess you can change it.
I'm tempted to scream.
Don't.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to. All right, go ahead. You
Um,
answer the questions.
yeah, it's a good question or questions, and I'm probably gonna get off track here, so you can just put me on track whenever. You can use the raise hand function. It's a good function. Um, what do I think would change? What do I? Okay, you can. You have your hand. Yes, Joel. Popcorn Joel.
Popcorn Geo.
Okay. So wait. The question is, what do I think would change under a Biden presidency or a Trump presidency, and
Yes.
uh, and would it be good, or what do I think would change for the
Personal
better?
opinion on it, like the changes, and then your personal opinion. As an American, a young leftist college kid.
Yeah. Um, well, what I think would change under a Biden administration, I mean, I think we would have some basic changes. Like we would revert back to a lot of um, a lot of pre-Trump policies. I mean, just the easy stuff. I think he would definitely put us back in the Paris Climate Accords. Um, he would most likely try to put us back in the Iran deal. Um, he would do he would do basic stuff. I can't really think of anything major that he would do. I mean, I hear leftist commentators kind of speculating that he would follow through on his minimum wage promise, but I don't see him doing that. Like a $15 minimum wage is a big deal for leftists, and I don't see him doing anything that would remotely make us proud or happy. And to him, $15, I think, to him is like a big ask. So I could see him bring the federal minimum wage up to $10 or $11 an hour, because I think to him 15 is like a starting point, and then he would negotiate it down, because you know Biden is used to negotiating himself down in order to appease Republicans, because I think that's what he prides himself on, meeting in the middle with Republicans. Um, that would be an improvement, $10 minimum wage. Um, and my feelings on it as an American, I mean, I would feel probably the same as I've felt for a long time now, which is that my relationship with America is a complicated one, and all of our relationship with America is a complicated one. And it's hard to be proud of a country that um, that ignores a lot of the basic needs and demands of the vast majority of working people. Um, but at the same time, I mean, uh, I guess I would be prouder of an America under Biden, eh, but it would be a marginal, difference from what my feelings are now. And under Trump, what do I think would change? I don't think anything would change. I think under Trump, what we've seen is that Trump has always liked the trappings of power, but he lets everyone else fill in the blanks for him. And that's why, even though he ran on this very populist platform, uh, he's governed in the mold of the neoconservatives that he ran against. And I mean, I shouldn't even say that he's governed that way, because I really don't think he's had much to do with governance at all. I think it's just the people around him who are filling in the blanks for him. I don't think he could care less. Um, but what would my feelings about that be? I don't know, not good, bad. I would have bad feelings about that. um, uh, that's a that's a kind of tough question. Um, but I have a question for you,
Yeah.
and I forgot it. But you were going to say something. What were you saying before you asked me that question? What was your preamble there? Because your preamble made me think of a question.
Um,
Do you remember?
well, I mean, I was talking because we were talking about changes and how in other countries that
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay,
they
okay,
can
okay.
have like meaningful conversations, or I guess like
Got it.
they don't have to question what is real or fake.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
My question was this, and this is the direction I thought you were going in. Um, what? I mean, we always talk about change, right? Um, and that's what a lot of our focus is on. I mean, the left is the change wing of the political spectrum, and the right is usually more traditionalist, conservative, bearers of the status quo. But I want to say, okay, aside from just the basic stuff that our country was founded on, what do you think shouldn't change? Because we talk a lot about like a lot of things changing. What do you think shouldn't change? And then if that question's too easy for you to answer, I want you to tell me what is one thing that a lot of leftists want to change that you don't think should change, if anything.
Okay. Um, so I I've I've got some grievances with the Constitution, our Constitution, and I'm jealous of Chile because I'd like at some point for us to rewrite ours. I think us having this fantasy of it being a perfect document is just silly. I mean, it's amendable for a reason, right? Because everything can always be improved upon. But, we got to look at like, I think it's time for just a completely different constitution in general. But there are important things that I do like. And it's funny because a lot of the things that I do like were the changes of the past. freedom of speech is an amendment. It wasn't, the original. The Bill of Rights was written right after, but um, and I guess this ties into the thing with leftists. At certain points, I've been um, against hate speech, but my position has changed a little bit. Um, I'm definitely against any like immediate threats of violence or harm. And that's outlined in the Constitution. Um, but I'm in opposition of hate speech laws. I'm anti-censorship because I'm already starting to see, yeah, like there are right wing, far right people being censored, but there's also left wing people being censored, and validating the horseshoe theory and equating someone who believes in white supremacy and eradication of other races to someone who thinks that workers should own everything they produce. Like, those are two very, very different things, but they're considered far left, far right. So I like free speech protections. Something that I want to keep that I believe is in danger are a lot of labor protections. We should definitely have an episode on the Supreme Court at large and Amy Crony Barrett.
That's a good one. I haven't heard that one.
Thank you. But I'm very concerned about labor laws and labor protections that are going to be harmed. So there are things that I think that we're getting right here, but I can only think in an international lens, and compared to other developed nations, we're doing a pretty shitty job.
Yeah, I agree. So, per my second question, which is like, what is one thing that most leftists, or I guess a lot of leftists, want to change that you don't want to change? What was is your answer to that one the hate speech thing, like instituting hate speech laws?
Yeah, and I think that also goes into platforming and deplatforming. At Middlebury College, a big incident is this guy Charles Murray. He wrote this book called The Bell Curve, where one of the main premises is that non-white people are just biologically dumber. And he makes a case against affirmative action. And so he's just objectively, he is racist. I mean, I'm not using it as a buzzword. I'm using it as like the literal definition, a belief that one race is superior to another just by virtue of that race. So he's literally racist. Like, there's no arguing that. The question is, do you give him a platform to speak? And I'm at a crossroads here, because on one point, I don't think it's a no platform dynamic as much as it's we're students who pay tuition to a school, and if we don't want our school inviting somebody with our money, then we should have a say in that.
Wait, let me ask you something. Did they pay him?
So no, he originally came through an external group that just happens to be on our campus. And so that first argument wouldn't be relevant. But more recently, he was going to come through a Middlebury club. However, he had agreed to come for free. So that would have they did that strategically to negate that argument. So there's that argument. But then there's this sense of like, you're supposedly a campus that is, especially now, all these college campuses are committing to anti-racism, but you're going to allow for a space on your campus for a racist person to make their argument for racism. But I think that practically, myself as an anti-racist, I think that in a situation like that, because he's not going to convince anybody. There's no one. You're not going to go to a college. he's not going to convince anybody. But what is going to happen is if you protest it, if you give it the attention that it's there to provoke, then right wing media outlets spin it and use it for a narrative. And just like last time around, he got a bunch of book sales and interviews, and he got platformed for real
Yeah.
because he got to go on talk shows and he was all over the news. And that's how they, he wasn't deplatformed. He was given a bigger platform. My advocacy back then was just pretend it's not happening. Don't just ignore it,
Right.
Or in certain instances, let the event happen and let him say all the racist shit, and then either question him there or after the fact be like, see, like, you heard him speak. Everything he had to say was stupid.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, that's really like the ideal strategy, which is, I mean, let these guys, as long as the college isn't paying them,
Yeah.
let them come in. Like, let them all come in. Let the lowest of the low, just most abject, morally corrupt, disgusting ideologues. Let them come in and spew their trash, and then just don't go to where they are. Just there are going to be like 2 or 3 people sitting in the audience, and don't pay them any mind. So then they can't say that they were being censored because the college didn't invite them, and they can't say that all these triggered leftist snowflakes melted just because someone had a different opinion.
Yeah.
That's the best strategy. And yeah, I mean, sometimes when I'm in a late night rabbit hole, I get in a very dark place and I watch Turning Point USA videos. and and yeah, I was watching like this.
That's your dirty pleasure.
Yeah,
Mine is
yeah.
PragerU.
Oh, oh wow.
PragerU is so funny, man.
Naughty.
PragerU is so funny.
Naughty boy. You're a naughty boy. Wow.
I just I think it's funny because in back in like 2015, 2016, I unironically would like watch some of that content, like not just PragerU, but like um
Turning Point
that's
USA.
that sphere of content, because I was at a point where I was like, you know what? I'm like both sidesing, I'm feeling it out. But I mean,
Yeah.
as anyone else is going to eventually do, like when I'm consuming both sides and I put them side by side and I'm looking for answers, I'm like, wait, these guys are just wrong or in bad faith, like
Right.
99% of the time.
Yeah. Well, no, the dangerous thing about that, and well, let me just talk about what I was going to say, which is I was in a late night YouTube rabbit hole watching Turning Point USA videos, and I was watching this Caitlin Bennett video where she goes to, I think it's the
She
university.
poops her pants. She pooped her pants. You
I
know that,
know.
right?
Yeah, of course I
Yeah.
know. Of course I know. Nothing against it. I love it, actually. I mean, listen.
Don't you actually know someone who pooped her
Hmm.
pants?
I think I've now that you're mentioning it, it rings a
I
few
don't know.
bells.
I don't know.
Forget
But
about
anyway,
it. Anyway, um, no, yeah, nothing against pooping pants. We all have had little accidents. It is a little bit funny. It is pretty funny. But uh, I don't hold it against her. I hold her, stupid and dangerous beliefs against her.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, she was at like the University of Ohio, I think, and there's like this huge riot. These students saw that she was there, and they started harassing her and yelling at her, and they really didn't do any justice to the left. Um, and that kind of stuff is really dangerous to the left because,
They just take the bait, man. They just like, that's what she wants. She
yeah, of
wants you
course,
to take the bait. She can't make a video if no one shows up. Like if the 10 Republicans on campus show up,
right,
what's she
exactly.
gonna do? Oh, put a video up of her her little meet and greet? Like no, she's gonna be like, damn, this failed. I gotta find a new
Yeah,
school.
yeah, exactly. And that stuff, like, even I, as a hardcore leftist who is totally and completely entrenched in the left, even I looked at that and I was like, oh my God, that's not right. Like, is this the left? Is this the left? And
Although Caitlin Bennett is interesting because She has editorial power over her content. However, there are clips I've seen of her that she's put up where she's just getting owned. Like she's getting shit on.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Like she's getting actually destroyed by some random college freshman and she uploaded it.
Yeah, no, I
If
know.
you have full editorial control and you uploaded a clip of someone destroying you,
Yeah, it must mean that she's really like hard pressed for content. I mean, that's the old joke, isn't it? Like, Caitlin Bennett says she's not a socialist, but it seems like she likes
sometimes
to
she
get.
like helps make the argument.
No, no, it seems like she likes to get publicly owned. That's the old joke.
Oh.
Ooh, yeah,
Ew.
ooh. Um,
Very nice.
no, we sound like Dave Rubin. Ooh, ooh, ideas. Um,
Yeah, I'm
no,
actually a centrist. I'm a
oh,
classical liberal.
right, right, yeah. Yeah, classical liberal. By the way, a classical liberal, like I don't think he really has a grasp uh, on just the fluidity uh, of labels. Like a classical liberal, I don't know if he realizes, is not really what he means when he's saying I'm the last liberal. I'm not sure if he has a grasp on. I mean, classical liberal is like basic. It's your basic first wave of structural adjustment and fiscal reforms that open the government up to big business and corporate interests. Anyway, I want to go back. What was I saying before? Oh yeah, right. Like those videos that you were referencing, where, for example, like that hugely popular video of the commies on campus just talking it out with her. Like those are extremely effective for the left, and that's exactly what we have to do. Like our ideas are better, and I mean, it's clear she doesn't really know what she's talking about, and she's not that smart. I mean, she's good at what she does, but she's not that smart. So if you don't shout at her and you don't mob her, and if you engage with her and have an intellectual dialogue where you're actually curious at getting to the bottom of her philosophy and at her core beliefs, she looks like a fool. She just looks really stupid because she is. She's just not that smart. So engage with these people. I mean, some of these people are actually very intelligent, and if you engage with them, you
No,
might get
they're
them.
skilled. They've got a whole. They've perfected the dialogue tree method of bad faith playing gotcha.
Yeah,
They're not there to learn anything. They're
right.
there to try to make you look stupid.
Like
Those are the ones you
Steven
gotta avoid.
Crowder. Like Steven
Yeah.
Crowder, he. I
I
mean,
would say do not approach. And not because, oh, you're scared of him because he's right. It's like, no, because he's going to just try to make me look bad instead of,
yeah.
talking about the actual
I was
point.
watching a Steven Crowder video, and it's this video that like this one guy in it who's I guess a leftist. He actually does very well against Steven Crowder. But the thing I realize is that this whole change my mind thing, it's a gimmick. I mean, I guess everyone knows that. But he was having this huge change my mind rally, and this one leftist was actually engaging in a civil conversation with him. And when Steven Crowder knew that he couldn't really win against this guy in terms of intellect, he just resorted to he was like a cornered animal, and he started saying, "Oh, you ad hominem attacked me," and I mean, it was just complete bullshit. But then afterwards, like he dismissed the guy. He said, "Okay, I think we've had enough of this conversation." After that, what struck me was this. He's doing this whole change my mind, thoughtful dialogue nonsense. It's in total bad faith, and the charade is. I mean, it's just so thinly veiled because he then promotes this pamphlet saying, "Here's the change my mind pamphlet. If you are ever in a conversation with a leftist and they bring up these points, this is exactly how you respond." He was saying this to his audience, right? So it just goes to show that these free speech warriors, these people who claim that they want a respectful civil dialogue, they're not in it to have their minds changed, as they would say. They're in it to promote an agenda, a pernicious agenda. And I guess it's just up to you to suss out who you should engage with and who you shouldn't. Because some of these guys, yeah, they are really skilled at obfuscating and circumventing the point. But I would say, in general, it is good to actually, engage in a substantive discussion where you do try to fulfill like some sort of intellectual curiosity, because that's when their actual character comes out, when you kind of prosecute their ideas and the core philosophies behind those ideas.
That's an insightful take, Gio.
Thanks.
That's an insightful take.
Did I leave you speechless, or did you just walk away from your computer while I was rambling?
No, you left me speechless.
Okay, good. I try. Is that it, or do you want to talk about anything else, or what's up?
Well, let's just I don't know. Let's get some final reflection on the election, because this one's been going for we're going for a little bit. We got ourselves a thick episode 1.
Yeah, it's pretty thick.
Yeah, I don't foresee much editing for the editor to have to do. Our editor, Chris.
Yeah, Chris Redmond.
Yeah, Chris Redmond will take care of this one.
Yeah, although there might have to be some audio adjustment in terms of
yeah, I'm gonna have to. I'll bump up my audio. I mean, for all 2 of you listening at home,
right.
When you hear this, Gio and I will sound the same. But when Chris Redmond is first playing back the recording,
yeah, it'll all be off kilter.
Yeah, let's reflect on where we are now. I mean, the voting. I've already voted. You voted already, right?
Nah, I'm gonna vote on election day.
So you're voting tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow.
All right, tell me what your voter plan is, and yeah, just tell me your voter plan. Let's hear it.
Well, you mean my voter plan as in like what I'm gonna do or how I'm gonna vote? I'm gonna vote for Biden. I mean, that's what.
Oh no, yeah, no.
No,
I knew that, but I guess you can tell the people.
Well, and I mean here where I am, all the early
you're voting
voting
in a very important place.
Oh yeah. I'm voting in Pennsylvania, which is probably like the keystone state, or the turnkey state. Yeah, the turnkey state, I think.
The turnpike state.
No, the turnkey state.
The turnip state.
Nope. Anyway, mute yourself. I don't like you. Oh wait, I actually have the power to mute you.
No, don't. No.
Okay. What was I saying? Yeah, I'm voting in Pennsylvania, and I mean the early voting sites around where I am were all pretty far away. Like, I don't have a car, so I bike everywhere, and the closest one was 25 minutes by bike. But tomorrow on election day, there will be a polling place on campus. So for that reason, I'm going there. And I also didn't want to vote by mail because I frankly don't trust that all the mail-in or a lot of the mail-in votes will be counted. I wanted to vote in person, so those are my reasons. And yeah, I'm gonna wake up tomorrow, maybe early in the morning, but probably not. Probably around noon, and go into my place and do whatever it takes.
I think by the time this episode is out, you'll already be voting. I think, because I think the plan is to this could come out in on the morning of election day.
What?
Or tonight. I mean, we'll see how efficiently Chris Redmond can edit.
I see. This is going to come out. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. And yeah, um, so my final reflection on the election, my election reflection, is that I think Biden will eke out a victory, but I won't be surprised if Trump wins because I think it'll be easy for him to steal it. Uh, the party just they don't care. They really don't care. They know that they're not. They don't have a popular mandate. They haven't had a popular mandate for generations. I mean, what is it like? 6 out of the last 7 elections, the popular vote was won by Democrats. Is that it? 6 out of 7.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, so, uh, they really don't care. They've done voter. They're they are already very skilled at voter suppression and at using institutions to their advantage, and they don't really have much in the way of moral scruples. You see what they did with the Supreme Court. They don't really care about precedents that they themselves set. So, I mean, if Trump wins, I won't be surprised because they will do everything they can to steal it.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean, you've got a little bit more faith in this thing than I do. I mean, I really would like Biden to win. I mean, you saw my you saw my prediction. The screen of the video, the YouTube video, will have a picture of it. But I'll also put in the description a write up that I had reflecting on it. Yeah, I mean, I voted early. I voted with my mom. We voted in New York. Um, we voted on the working families party line. I encourage anyone who's listening in New York, if you're voting for Biden, to do so on the WFP line. I think that's a great way to both protest the Democrats just a little bit, but also more importantly, um, the Democratic establishment of New York wants to take them off the ballot.
It'll be
And
great. It'll be great if the one person listening to this does vote on the Working Families Party line and is the
yeah,
deciding vote
yeah, yeah, they're the
for
one.
keeping them on. But yeah, let's set the record straight. You think Trump will leak out a victory? I think Biden will leak out a victory. Let's wait and see, right?
Yeah, let's wait and see.
Okay, all right. So next on the Geo and Joel podcast, hopefully, we will have Uncle Tony Redpill on. I reached out to Uncle Tony Redpill over Facebook. I created a Facebook account especially to reach out to him, and he didn't respond. I think the best way is I'll just have to find him in person because, I see him, I see his crew around. There's basically two of them. Like the two main guys in the crew are Uncle Tony Redpill and Greg the Greek. Yeah,
Oh,
and they're both pretty far right Trump guys. So if I see Greg the Greek, he's usually on the corner of uh, um, where this Colombian restaurant is in my neighborhood in
mm.
Astoria. He's usually catcalling women, so maybe I'll see him
All
there.
right. That's a pretty respectable.
Yeah, and Uncle Tony, I, the last I saw him was at the souvlaki truck. So so when I go up to New York, I'll look out for them, and hopefully we can get them on the next episode.
Okay. Okay, great.
Anyway, um, but power to the people. Left is best. Anything you want to add before I stop recording?
Just want to thank you to all of you who made it this far. I know about 4 people started the video, and one of you might have made it this far. The one person that did, um, thank you. Uh, yeah, that's all I got. We'll be back next week. Um, or I don't know. I mean, we can do these things whenever, right?
Yeah, yeah, fuck it.
If we want to, if we had something else to talk about later in the week, like if some drama goes down with the election, we might just do a part two,
Hmm.
episode two, or I don't know. You might not hear from us for another 2 or 3 weeks if the world blows over.
Right. And now we both need like a slogan or a catchphrase, like a signing off phrase. So what do you want yours to be?
Um, Power to the. That's. Do you have one?
Um, uh,
I'm Joel,
and I'm Gio.
and this has been Gio and Joel.
Ta ta.